Hello! Today we are going to be talking about section 4.5, which is all about parallel and perpendicular lines. So the first thing I want to do is take you way back to in chapter 3 when we first learned about parallel lines. We said parallel lines will never intersect. And then we said that slopes of parallel lines are equal. So for example, if I give you the equation y equals 2x minus 3, and I give you the equation y equals 2x plus 7, we would say that these lines are parallel because they have the same slope. The symbol for parallel, it looks like two vertical parallel lines. Now, a lot of students get confused here. They're like, there's a -3 and there's a 7. Whatever happened to those things are not the same. Remember that those are the y-intercepts, and those are irrelevant. We don't care about the y-intercept when we're talking about parallel lines. Perpendicular lines do intersect, but they intersect at a special way. They intersect at a right angle. So if you look at two lines that are perpendicular, we sometimes put a little box in the corner to show that that is an exactly 90-degree angle. Now, slopes of perpendicular lines, instead of being equal, are what are called opposite reciprocals. That means that when you look at the fractions, they are opposite signs and they are flipped over from each other. For example, if we start with y equals 2x minus 3 again, a line that is perpendicular to that would be y equals, and then for the slope, instead of 2, if we think about that as 2 over 1, we would change it to a 1/2 and make it negative. Now look at these numbers. 2 over 1, which is positive, -1 over 2, which is the opposite reciprocal. So the opposite reciprocal slopes mean that the lines are perpendicular. And the symbol for perpendicular looks like a little upside down T, and that'll save you a lot of writing because you won't have to write it out. So what kinds of problems would I expect you to do with this? If I say write the equation of the line that is parallel to this one, but goes through this point, we are always going to use point-slope form. So here's how we do that. We start with y plus 5 because there's a -5 here, and two negatives make a positive. Now the m that we're going to use, because we want to be parallel, we're going to use the same slope as we see here. The slope then would be a 1/3, and then parentheses x plus 3 because two negatives make a positive, and you're done. If we want to do the same thing, we want to be parallel, which means we want to have the same slope. So we're going to steal this slope and use it again, and we're going to make our slope on our new line a -1. Here's my x, here's my y. So y minus 11 equals -1 times x plus 2. And again, I'm using the -1 because it should have the same slope. Now, if we want to be perpendicular instead, we're going to take this slope and we're going to make it the opposite reciprocal. So it's going to be positive, because this one's negative, so the opposite. And then the reciprocal would be a 1/2 instead of a 2. We would write y minus, the y value here is 3, equals positive 1/2 times x plus 3, because two negatives make a positive. And again, we're using a 1/2 because it's the opposite reciprocal slope. If we are perpendicular, we're going to take this slope and we're going to make it the opposite reciprocal. Since my original here is positive, I would make it negative. And since it's 1/4, I would make it 4/1, or you could just write 4, -4. So we would have y plus 3 equals, again, I'm going to use that slope, so -4 parentheses x minus 1. And again, I'm using this slope, the opposite reciprocal, in the equation of my new line. Now, last but not least, sometimes I'm going to give you a problem that just says, here's a bunch of lines. Tell me who's parallel. Tell me who's perpendicular. Tell me who's neither. So the first thing is y has to be by itself. That way we can tell what slope we are working with. So, good to go for line A. Line B, we got to do a little work. So subtract the x on both sides. We get 5y equals -x plus 2. We divide by 5. We get y equals -1/5 x plus 2/5. And line C, again, got to do a little work. We're going to add the 2x. Now, because there was a 0 there, I'm not going to write anything down except for the 2x because the 0 doesn't really change anything. Then I'm going to divide by -10. And I get y equals 2 divided by -10 makes -1/5 x. So again, I'm just reducing this to get this. Now let's look at the slopes. First guy's slope is 5. Then -1/5, then -1/5. Right away I notice these two slopes are the same. So I would say B is parallel to C. Then I notice that if I take this number and I flip it over, I get 5. And if I change the sign, I get a positive, which matches this one. So since these slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other, we would say A is perpendicular to B and A is perpendicular to C. And I'm done. Okay, that's it for today. Have a wonderful evening and I'll see you guys tomorrow.